Our next presentation is an interview, a video interview with Don Lippert of Elemental Accelerator, hosted by Leslie Wilkins of Maui Economic Development Board. In this video, Don explains Elemental's investing philosophy with examples from their portfolio of clean energy companies.
Aloha, I'm delighted to welcome Don Lippert, CEO of Elemental Accelerator, and also Director of Innovation and Community at Emerson Collective, to the Hawaii Energy Conference to have a conversation with me. Thank you so much, Don, for joining us. We really appreciate it. So I wanted to harken back to the conference theme, which, as we know, is the energy transition in Hawaii, something that you have been a very big part of and continue to be. And it's focused on investments and people and projects. The word investment, we are defining in its broadest sense to include, besides financial capital, our cultural, social, and human capital. And I know these tenets of defining investment very broadly are at the core of Elemental Accelerator's mission. So would you like to talk to us a little bit about your investment thesis?
Sure. Leslie, thank you so much for having me. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here. This is one of my favorite conferences. So to talk a little bit about Elemental, our investment thesis is we are working to invest in technologies and communities and solutions that get at the root of the systems behind climate change. So what that means is Elemental is actually a nonprofit. So while we invest in technologies and we believe that entrepreneurs are these amazing sort of forces for change and can be forces for incredible good. We think about investment broadly, just like you said, about what is actually the community investment that goes alongside the technology investment? What's the human capital investment that goes alongside the technology investment? So our investment thesis is focused on solutions to climate change, solutions to some of our most pressing environmental challenges, and seeing that through the lens of entrepreneurs that are now building maybe smallish or medium-sized companies that will be the biggest companies that disrupt and change the industries that are leading to climate change and our environmental degradation that we see today. So to get specific, what that means is that Elemental, we've invested in over 100 companies so far, and they're across the key sectors that are the most polluting, but also the sources of opportunity for us. So that's energy, water, food and agriculture, transportation and mobility, and circular economy, which is everything related to sort of materials and carbon and all of those things. So we really believe in investing at the intersection of social equity and climate change and investing in communities alongside technology.
I think that's fabulous. I wanted to ask you about a little further about your investment thesis. I love the fact that you use impact first and then return, and how well correlated those are. Do you want to elaborate on that or share an example with one of your portfolio companies?
Sure. So like you said, we're looking for impact first and then after that return. But we've seen those because this sector is so huge and the opportunity is so huge, the returns actually have followed as well. So out of over 100 companies that we've invested in, we've actually celebrated 20 exits from those companies, which are companies that are being acquired or have gone public and have had sort of real success in scaling and moving forward. But as we think about impact first, I'll give an example of a local company that we love and think is super impactful, which is FarmLink Hawaii. So they're a company that has connects small farmers to customers. And before the pandemic, they were connecting these small farmers and batching all of their different produce and all their different goods and providing it and selling it to restaurants and grocery stores and other sort of commercial outlets. And then when the pandemic hit, they immediately had to pivot to selling direct to consumer. And what makes FarmLink so important and special is that instead of a farmer having to go to every single grocery store, every single restaurant, every single home and deliver their produce all over the island, they can actually now go to one of FarmLink's hubs, which are all over the island, and then FarmLink's cold trucks bring them and sort of do that batching and do the delivery and do the customer interface and the billing and all these, the marketing, all these things that small farmers then don't have to do. So it's an example of really investing for impact first, for farmers, for local food, for health and local families, And then we can see the business grow after that. So that's one example.
I think that's a fabulous example, and thank you for that. The other thing that we share is we both are on the ground working in community, and we share a similar experience. Working with community is messy. It's always messy, but it's absolutely imperative for sustainable success and moving us towards our clean energy goals. Would you like to talk about how the imperative actually for your cohort companies to be integrated into their respective communities and build capacity there?
Yes, I mean, it's a key issue for us. So I think what makes climate technology so different from other kinds of technology or other kinds of investment is that it happens not in a vacuum or sort of like from an app store on your phone, but it happens in real communities. So these are, people buying electric cars instead of gas guzzling cars, right? Or it's people installing solar on their homes. It's people seeing a clean energy facility outside their windows, seeing a new kind of water treatment plant. These things are all, many of them are physical infrastructure, things that people interact with every day. And so the way that you think about engaging community has to be so different from scaling any other kind of technology. So Elemental, we don't just invest in the technologies, we actually fund the projects, and the projects in terms of steel in the ground projects. And so what that tells us and what we learn from that is actually what happens when technology starts to interface with community. And like you said, that can be a really messy process. The way that we've developed, or sort of the strategy that we've developed around this, is something that's pretty deep community partnership to execute these technology projects. And I'll give you an example of what we mean by that. So there's a real challenge that we have across Hawaii is the cesspools. We have about 80,000 cesspools across Hawaii, which means we have untreated sewage that kind of comes through our ecosystems, comes through our yards and communities into our nearshore oceans, and creates really serious problems for human health as well as ocean health. So this is something that the community has been telling us at Elemental for years is a challenge, and what are some of the technology solutions that might be there to help it? And so for a couple of years, we've been looking at companies, meeting all kinds of people working on this issue. And finally last year found a company that we thought, okay, this is an entrepreneur and a technology that we think could really work. We first, before making any investment, we bring those technologies and those solutions and ideas to the communities where they might be implemented and say, what do you think of this? In this case, the community said, this seems like something that could be really interesting. We need some initial capital to get it started. That's where we leaned in. And this is a company called Cambridge Innovation. They have a distributed model for treating wastewater that then turns into reusable wastewater as well as power. So we partnered with them and with a local community group, VI, run by Stuart Coleman, to sort of bring that solution to Hawaii and do it in a way that actually leads with community partnership first. So VI becomes an incredibly important partner in this deployment. And it's not sort of an afterthought of, we have this entire project scoped and we know exactly what we're going to do. And now we're going to bring it to a neighborhood board meeting, at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday and tell you guys about it and take some questions. It's actually from the beginning, we have community partners that are walking alongside this development process and thinking about, what is going to be acceptable here? How do we build trust with people? What are some of the concerns people might think about? What are some of the unintended consequences that we're not really thinking through? How do people benefit once this project comes to fruition? So that's how we think about community partnership. And what I'm really interested in, and what we're interested in Elemental, is how you actually scale that model and build this into the DNA of companies early. And once you do that, I think it's a one-way street. I think once companies, entrepreneurs, organizations learn the benefits of community partnership, there's not really a going back, because people on their team and their stakeholders start to expect this and start to understand this is the way they do business. There are ways to actually build this into the financial mechanisms of projects. And if you think about it, it really de-risks the project for later on. So, as opposed to getting, 30 or 40 or 70% through a project, and then, really needing to understand sort of opposition and unintended consequences, if you're designing from the beginning, you can avoid a lot of that early on. I think the last word of this is that, just one more thought here is that, these two organizations and kinds of organizations tend to speak really different languages, right? So have different vocabulary, work on different timescales, have different backgrounds. So there's really sort of this like intersection that I think we need to get really good at in sort of like people who care about climate, people who care about clean energy, people who care about social equity and transforming our systems, we actually need to get really good at that intersection. And it's hard, but I think there's an enormous amount of potential there. And I think we need to invest so much more on the community side to match the kind of investment that we're making on the technology side.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Just speaks to our hearts. Thank you. I wanted to say congratulations. You've just recently launched your new 5-year strategy, which I think encompasses your years of experience and lessons learned. I think that's foundational to that strategy and how you can share that and apply that. I think you mentioned that your portfolio companies have basically been kind of a microcosm. So how do you apply that more broadly? So what are some of your favorite tenets about your new 5-year strategy?
I think the 5-year strategy is really a recognition of the time that we're in. So many factors have come together really in 2020, 2021 that are going to change the way the next 5 and 10 years rolls out. So I think, we saw the world changing and realized that we also need to change. We have political alignment for climate solutions. We have a real awareness now of the role of social equity and the fact that, we have to address climate change and social equity together. We have incredible momentum from corporates with over 1,400 large corporations having committed to net zero goals or carbon negative goals. And so we have this, clean energy is much cheaper than fossil energy. The markets are moving fast. So there's this incredible alignment, really for the first time since, I've been doing this for about a dozen years, for all of these forces moving together. So we realized that we need to change too. And one of the key parts of the 5-year strategy and how we're thinking about it is that we need to take, we've funded 70 projects, over $40 million worth of companies. Those companies have gone on to raise $4 billion, and many of them have become big companies. And we've learned so much along the way about commercializing technology, about the intersection of technology and community, about, interns and workforce, and how we actually bring dozens and dozens of interns from traditionally excluded communities and people of color into companies and into startups and into the technology world. So we've learned so much about all of these various things. And now it's really our job to say, how can we share those learnings in a way that can help the whole sector move forward faster? Because, we work in climate. There's a clock on climate. It's very different from other issues. And so it's really about how do we meet this moment as an organization? How do we share our learnings? And create as many sort of like open-handed, open platforms as possible for our data, for our learnings, for our tools and templates. And so that's really what we're thinking about as an organization. We want to open up all those learnings and see if by doing that we can accelerate even just one project in one place, one entrepreneur who we might not directly work with, but who's benefits from this. And through that, play more of a role and be more helpful in overall meeting our climate goals in time.
Awesome. Well, that was a perfect segue to our last 2 minutes. This has gone very quickly. Something else we share a mutual passion for, and that is building an inclusive workforce in technology and in clean energy. We know that women have been very much underrepresented in the energy space leadership. You are the founder of WIRE, Women in Renewable Energy. I think you still hold an emeritus position. How do you see that we can continue to outreach and bring more women and underrepresented populations into tech and into entrepreneurship and into leadership to advance our clean energy goals and address climate change?
It's such a big question, Leslie. I mean, you and I are so passionate about this, but it's also, everyone has a role in this. And we often say that there is no, single job that's a climate job. Really, every job can be a climate job, right? Whether you're in marketing or accounting or film or art, anything, right? It all can be sort of contributing to these solutions. So we think about it on multiple different levels of building an inclusive workforce, which includes women, which includes others from different backgrounds and lived experiences. So it includes everything from sort of entry-level jobs within our portfolio companies, in the communities where people are working, or technician jobs and things like that. And one of my favorite examples is on that front is a company called Charger Help based out of LA. And their training videos, their entire sort of like ethos around bringing in people from frontline communities to work as electric vehicle technicians is about How do you make your training videos as accessible as possible? How do you ensure that people who are providing the training look and talk like the people who are getting trained? So it's sort of everything about that entire experience. How do you make people feel like they belong? So sort of starting there, and then thinking all about, even our executives, the founders that we've brought in who are women, or the companies who have maybe one woman on the board. One of the things that we've invested in partnership with Frost Family Foundation on Maui is executive coaching for women. Because one thing that we've seen is that, we may have a startup that has, one woman on the executive team, or two women, or one woman on the board, but supporting that woman, or supporting sort of that underrepresented person in being successful in their role is really important, because we actually tend to see much more turnover and less retention of people in those roles. So getting into the role is one thing, but then how do you actually support people once they're there is another thing. So I guess I would say we think about it on all these different levels, but what's become so clear over the last number of years is just how many of us need to pull together to make this ecosystem work. It's not going to be any one startup. It's not going to be any one organization. It's not going to be any one school or government agency, but it's actually, everyone really has actually a piece of building more inclusive workforce and thinking through this. The last stat I'll leave you with on that is that I think, you and I also share a passion for young people and bringing young people into this space in a way that is really accessible for them. We had just about 60 or so internships, I think, available this summer in different companies and all kinds of different positions. And we had almost 1,400 young people apply for those positions. There's just a hunger and appetite, or young people, they want to be involved. They want to be involved now. They're not waiting for their education. They're not waiting for fancy degrees. They're getting involved in startups, as writers, as activists, in every way they know how. And I think part of, what I see as our responsibility is to help create on-ramps and pathways for those youth to contribute their gifts in whatever way they can.
Absolutely, and continue to nurture their pathways up into leadership. And work-based learning is absolutely the most important thing that we can do early on to continue to build their success. Well, Don, thank you so much for the time. I really enjoyed this. It went too quickly. I look forward to when meeting in person that I can attend the next WIRE meeting when it can go back to having in-person meetings. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your investment in our young people. You're a tremendous role model. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for everything you do, Leslie. It's such a privilege and honor to be part of this. Thanks.